So the book has 5 main characters whose lives are intertwined in various ways. And one of the characters is a young aspiring poet. One of the characters is a young magician. That's where the book began, with my thinking about wanting to write about a young magician. One of the characters is the young magician's father, who is a famous, insufferable novelist. One of the characters is the mother of the young poet, who raised her as a single mother in a town very much like Columbus, but not exactly Columbus. And one of the characters is the mentor of the young poet, who is a grown-up poet, who was also the protagonist of a novel I published in 2005 called Dog. And one of the other reasons I wrote this book was because when I left Jill, the poet, at the end of Dog, I don't know, it's not that I kept thinking about her, it's just that when I thought about her, I really wished for more for her than she had at the end of Dog. Did she just need mama? So the name of the famous novelist is Martin. And I'm good at like alternating my words with a baby crying without getting the least bit distressed. Very happy to have Maxine here. So I think Martin gets mentioned in this little excerpt that I'm going to read. I'm going to read from it's about a third of the way through the novel, and it's a point where Jill, the poet and professor, has just had an advising meeting with her undergraduate, Caroline. And it's their first advising meeting. Caroline is only, I don't know, maybe 18, and has just revealed that she wants to be a poet. And so I'm going to read about, I don't know, 2 pages, starting with the end of this meeting. I'm going to we'll wait and see if Maxine settles a little. She settled. So, okay. So we're at the end of this meeting in Jill's office, the kind of meeting I have had a billion times, and soon will never have again, because I'm retiring from my teaching job in a few weeks. Okay. Caroline says, "Thank you so much. This has been amazing." She hoisted the backpack onto one shoulder that did not look nearly sturdy enough to bear it. "But I still don't think I can tell my mother that I'm going to be a poet." "I understand," Jill smiled. "And no one says you have to. What you do with your life is nobody's business but your own." "Wow," Caroline said. "Tell that to my mother." "Well, you might not want to put it quite that way when you speak to her." "I'm not going to put it anyway," Caroline said heatedly. "There's no point even trying to talk to her about it. She thinks it's silly enough that I've declared an English major. What are you going to do with that?" That's like her mantra. But if I told her I was going to study poetry, that I planned to write poetry, you know, like for a career, it would be as if I were saying, "I'm planning to go live on the moon." She'd be worried, yes, Jill said. But you know what? She'd be right to worry, because no one earns a living as a poet. You'll have to find something to do that will keep a roof over your head. When you do decide to talk to her about your future, make sure to talk about that too. I got lucky, honestly. I have this. Jill spread her hands to indicate what was around her. Her desk, piled high with books, the books on her many bookshelves, the tall window that looked out over the quad, even Caroline herself. And I don't know how I would have managed otherwise. It was only after the girl had left that Jill thought, nonsense. She knew just how she would have managed. She would have kept on temp typing and freelancing. She would have proofread scientific manuals, copy-edited unauthorized celebrity biographies and dreadful novelizations of popular TV series and movies. She would have managed just as others had. Trollope had worked at the post office. Faulkner wrote As I Lay Dying while working the night shift at a power plant. Joseph Heller wrote Catch-22 while working in advertising. Wallace Stevens and William Carlos Williams were anomalies, like Chekhov, like Toni Morrison, in having other work that truly mattered to them. Maxine Kumin and her horses, the librarians, Borges and Larkin, but most only managed somehow, just as she would have. She had been very lucky indeed. Even if there had been times, long periods of time, when she hadn't seen it that way, when leaving New York City for a teaching job in the Midwest had seemed to her a kind of failure. When the too many years between her first and second books, when she began to wonder if there'd ever be a second book, had her believing that she'd squandered all her early promise. When that promise hadn't seemed early at all. And yet how young she had been then. What could she have been thinking? There had been a night at Yaddo. She remembered it perfectly, although it had been so long ago, when she had spoken of herself to Martin as over the hill. There's an earlier chapter where she's thinking back when she first met the famous novelist when they were at Yaddo together as young writers. She'd said it humorously, laughing at herself, but he had scolded her. He had told her she was beautiful and brilliant, and when you're old, you'll still be beautiful and brilliant. But why rush it? Where's the fire? She remembered that she had blushed, and to distract him, to distract herself too, from noticing how pleased she was, she said, "So what's old then, Martin?" And that he had said, without an instant's hesitation, 40. And she had agreed. 40 was old. 40 was not just over the hill, but over the river and through the woods, and thus her house, which she loved and had lived in now for so many years, would be grandmother's house, except that she was nearer now to 50 than to 40, and had borne no children, and would never have grandchildren. She was very old now, by young Martin's standards, by her own too. How had she not been able to see at the time how young she was? She looked at photographs that had been taken 15, 20 years ago. She even had one of Martin and herself and two other people, two composers who did not share in the general antipathy toward Martin from that summer at Yaddo. And she was taken aback by how much prettier and younger she had been then than she thought. She looked like a girl. She had still been a girl. Caroline Forrester, she reflected on that autumn afternoon after their first appointment, the first of many, as it would turn out, had 10 years to go before she'd be as old as Jill had been that Yaddo summer. And even then, she, Caroline, would still be very young. And she herself, Jill, would be approaching 60. This was the sort of thing about which she had to remind herself. How old she was now, in comparison to the very young people by whom she was surrounded. For just as she'd imagined herself when young, as already old, now that she was, if not old, despite what she and Martin had once thought, then certainly no longer young. She sometimes imagined a much smaller distance between herself and her students than there actually was. One was never the age one felt oneself to be. That's where I'll stop.